Thanks for joining us for another episode of Start, Grow and Monetize Your Podcast with him, James Burtt, and me, Alex Chisnall. We are going to be talking about the perfect podcast launch plan.
Something we've done a fair few times, my man.
We've done nearly 400 times between us. We're going to cover building some little bit of pre-launch hype.
That is very, very key.
The strategy for launch week, the biggest week that you will ever have with your podcast, really.
Yeah, it is.
First 10 episodes and why they're super critical.
Oh, nice, okay.
Because 90% of people don't even get beyond
Episode 7.
And lastly, how to keep that post-launch momentum going.
Yeah, nice.
Okay, so pre-launch hype, what should we be thinking about to build some excitement before we drop those first few episodes?
So one of the things I always tell clients when we're working with them, and we tell people within our training courses and stuff as well, is you've basically got to take the cold market and make them warm, and the warm market and make them hot. And basically you just got to let people know over a period of time that this podcast is coming. Now, if you do, and we've tested this and measured this, and I know you do the pretty much exactly the same strategy, 2 weeks that we are always building up momentum for. And now what I found is if you talk about it for more than 2 weeks, people are like, dude, I get it. You got a podcast, great. Just let me know when this thing comes out. You get sort of audio cut off. People just stop listening. They're listening, but they're not hearing what you're saying.
Yeah.
And anything less than 2 weeks, what we found is that they don't feel like they're not invested enough into the launch of this thing. Now, there's a whole strategic way that you use the 2 weeks, and you basically want to, I can't even think of a better way to phrase it, you want to birth this show in front of people, basically.
Okay.
That was graphic, wasn't it?
Yeah,
public birthing, wow. But that's effectively what you're doing. You're showing people through the strategic content that you're putting out, hey, this podcast is coming, this is going to be the name of it. Take them on the journey, because if you take them on the journey, we've talked about this in a previous episode about creating super fans, then what you will find is that you have stakeholders who have got a vested interest in the success of this podcast, or want to see this succeed, or want to see the outcome of it, rather than just consumers of the content. So, for example, you could, within the 14-day promo process, you could go, hey, we're working on these 4 names. Love to know what you think the best name is. You might have already picked the name. You probably already have. Hey, we've got these 2, we're A/B testing artwork. What artwork? I always give this as an example. So when we work with clients, we always shortlist 5 tracks of different music that we think is a good fit for the audio brand of their show. So one of our clients had a big community of other marketeers in a Facebook group. I think there's like a couple of hundred of them. And she literally posted the 5. She's like, hey guys, got a podcast as part of the strategy. Hey guys, got a podcast coming out in a couple of weeks. Here's the 5 tracks that the production company have shortlisted for me. Tell me which one you prefer. And literally ran it as like a little poll. And somebody was like, I don't really like any of these, but I've gone onto that website, some really great track. I think this one fits you better.
Nice.
And then everyone piled on. They're like, yeah, this one's amazing. And it got like 20 upvotes. And that's the show that's the one that they went with for the theme music. Cool. So for example, like that community of people now, they are proper stakeholders. They are invested, or they have a vested interest in this show. They're not just the consumers of it. So that's effectively what you're doing over the 2 week period. Then you're pushing towards
people on the journey.
Take them on the journey, exactly that.
Absolutely.
Now, what you don't want to do necessarily, it depends on your brand positioning. You know, if you are a media company, we're about to do a couple of celebrity podcasts. They have to look like they're polished from the get-go, if that makes sense. They can't look like they're cobbled together. You can't sort of like build hey, here's me with a USB microphone, or here's me learning the process, or here's me choosing the theme music. It needs to look like it's a fully, finished thing. But for a lot of people, you don't just want to go, hey, I've got this podcast, it's going to be amazing, and it's coming out in 2 weeks. You're saying the same thing again and again and again. You want to show the evolution over a fortnight period of why they're interested in this show. And then the other piece of key advice that we always push people to is that within that content, you're pushing to a particular date and a particular time, and you're trying to get all of the downloads to one platform at one time on one day. That, from nearly 200 episodes worth of launch experience, is the thing that will make shows work in the majority of instances.
Perfect. I think we'll leave it at that for that one.
Have you got any other top tips for the fortnight?
I think that's it. For me, it's the same thing. You're taking people on that journey. You want them to feel invested enough that they're going to bring other people along the way, and it's front of mind for them. And like you say, if you do it too long, people are either going to get sick of you, or doesn't even register with them anymore, seeing another post of you. Or
it doesn't work for me anymore, by the way. Like, having launched as many podcasts as I have, like when I do it now, people are just not that hype. You're probably the same. Like when you're doing another one, they're like, Alex is doing another podcast.
I know.
But it still does work to an extent.
Yeah. And then you have a client like I had who, big client, who literally starts the pre-launch hype on the evening before the launch.
Just doesn't work.
24 hours before, and you're like...
We had it with the corporate client. They said, oh, yeah, by the way, social media team have said that we can only post about it once in the fortnight. And I was like, oh, okay. Why?
Yeah.
Because the rest of their content was cack, frankly. I was like, not like we were missing out on lots of other great stuff, guys, but okay.
Yeah, exactly that. Launch week strategy, okay. So... for me, this is the biggest week that you will ever have with your podcast, until your podcast gets to number 1, of course, and then you want to double down on that. But, launch... But it's
the make or break, though, isn't it? That first week.
So you want to have, built up some hype to actually get you through to launch week. You don't want to do, like we saw somebody that we know who left it until the day before of their launch to actually upload their episodes to the hosting platform before publishing their podcast. Okay, so you want to be super organized. We do this now. I'd like to say 48 hours, it might be 72, but a couple of days before. Yeah. You don't tell anyone that you've done that.
You don't want to go too early.
You don't even tell the client that it's there, know, but you just want to be able to have, uploaded the content, written the titles, written the descriptions, written the show notes. So, you've got all your eggs lined up in a row, already ready to go. And you know that as soon as you just hit publish, it's all good. Yeah. You've gotten the client the day before to read through it. Again, they don't always do that, to just double check that it's exactly as they want it. But it's all ready to go, so that launch week strategy, you've already got a schedule mapped out where you are talking about that podcast on a platform in a certain way, i.e. you are posting the trailer for episode 1 on day 1. That launch week, you want it mapped out as to what you're doing on every platform. You want the newsletter scheduled to go out. You've already written it. All of these things for launch week. And look, probably my biggest takeaway for launch week is don't try and do everything. We've done an episode just on launch week. Don't try and do everything that we talk about in launch week. Pick a couple of things that you think you can execute well. Yeah. If that thing is doing just jumping on your phone live and doing a live stream whilst you're walking to the bus in the morning, I don't know, that's all the time you've got, then that's one thing that you can execute. But don't try and do like 8, 9, 10 different things that we tell you to do. But equally, don't do nothing. Don't go on holiday like the host of said podcast did on the day after launch.
Really?
And still hasn't posted about it.
Oh, wow.
7 weeks later since launch, and the host hasn't posted about it. So if you don't do that, how would you expect anybody else? Yeah. Bit of a lesson to ourselves last night when we were chatting. Yeah. How would we expect anyone else to listen or watch our podcast if we're not regularly reviewing and tweaking what we see is working and what we see actually isn't working that well?
The whole methodology of build it and they will come just does not work anymore. No. The world is a very, very busy place. There's
Shall I
lots of
ask
stuff
Kevin Costner?
On.
To build it, they will come.
Is that a Kevin Costner?
No.
I'm not doing shows with you after lunch anymore. You go crazy for an hour. You need a little nana nap after a lunch, didn't you?
I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that.
You're like you're drunk.
I used to call them noodles. I used to call them Japanese power snoozers.
But yeah, but effectively in that week of launch week, like Alex said, have everything lined up and ready to go, but equally you just don't know what's going to happen on launch day, and you have to be willing and able to be reactive. So for example, you can know that you should be posting a couple of hours before, hey, this podcast is about to go live. When it goes live, you should post about, hey, it's gone live, and put the trailer out. You should have a link through to your platform of choice that you're driving all of that traffic to. You should also have the backup link, so if someone goes, oh, hey, I don't use Apple, or I don't use Spotify, I don't use YouTube, you can DM them a different one, but you're pushing everybody publicly to one single place, so that you're trying to drive as much traffic down that channel as possible.
Good point.
But then equally, if, for example, like my wife launched a podcast earlier this week and it jumped in at like number 102 and they were really chuffed, and then by the afternoon it was number 60 odd, then went up to number 50, then went up to number 40, then went to 39, dropped back down to 43, went up to 32 or something like that. It moved around. So I was like, you know, take screenshots. People are sending messages about how much they're enjoying it. People are sharing it on their social set. Share that stuff out.
Take the day off, man.
Take the day off.
Why not?
Enjoy it.
Why not take the day off? Why not?
Because build it and they will come does not work, as your client is going to find out by not posting about it.
Yeah.
Super frustrating. So yeah.
It's so frustrating. You can, it's the old thing, lead the horse to water, but you can't force the horse to drink. And it's the same when you're working with a client on this. But you're listening to this. This is your podcast that you've either already hosting or producing or thinking of hosting or producing. Take a leaf out of your own book. You want somebody else to listen to it or watch it, then you literally just need to do what we've just told you on this episode, basically. It isn't rocket scientist stuff, but you've got to do it.
Yeah.
And it's just one day. It's one day.
Yeah.
You're not going to do the same thing the week after. By then, you've got a plan, you have a schedule, and you just follow the process then.
Yeah.
I mean, the hardest thing in the world is launching a podcast. What's the second hardest thing in the world?
Staying consistent.
Yeah. After you've launched the podcast.
After you've launched a podcast. Yeah. I think one of the consistency pieces is absolutely imperative with that stuff. But again, if you can't be committed to the posting of the content, then don't start the podcast until you can.
Agree.
If you know you're going to hit a busy period for work, if you know, for example, you're going to be going on holiday,
postpone it.
Plan it around that stuff, because success in podcasting creates momentum. Like anything
in all areas,
in all areas of life,
business,
physics tells us it's easier to keep a moving object moving than it is to get it up and running. Like the hardest thing is to get the car. If you've ever had to try and bump start a car, old school reference point for people, kids who are going, what? But how can you bump start a Tesla? Pre-Tesla days, you had to bump start a car. Like getting it to move is so hard, but once it's moving, it's easy to keep it going. And again, it's not the be-all and end-all if you have a top-rated podcast launch, but having done it a lot of times, if you can get it to pop straight away, then all of a sudden you can outreach to bigger guests and you can outreach to bigger sponsors, and
get some local press, get more
local press, exactly
more
that.
Brand awareness,
So it builds that momentum. So allow yourself to have that momentum built. What was your next point?
First 10 episodes. Why are those first 10 episodes so critical for growth? I'll say the first one is that 90% of people don't get past episode 7 for a start. So you've reached episode 10, give yourself
a pat on the back.
Massive pat on the back. There's 4 or 5 million podcasts out there, depending on which platform you look at. There's only less than 400,000 that are active and actively creating new content. So, first 10 episodes are key because they put you in the top 10% of podcasts already.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why it's critical, because you've got more, if you're creating new content, your content on Spotify and Apple is going to rise to the top of the searches far quicker than the podcasts that have historically been there but are no longer creating content.
Yeah.
So it's that thing that you mentioned before. It's that momentum thing. Okay, those first 10 episodes. You can, American football, they plan out the first drive of the game. They plan out like the first 20 plays. Okay, are scripted. This is exactly what we're going to do for the first 20 instances we have the ball.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So you could do the same thing with this podcast. First 10 episodes, literally plan out how you're going to promote, those first 10 weeks, what you're going to do on every day. And then you've made it easy for yourself. You're just following the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you can take the step back, review the data and go, okay, none of this is working. Monday, posting static graphic doesn't work. Okay, so let's do something different on a Monday. Okay.
Any day posting a static graphic doesn't work, by the way, these days.
Yeah, it's a top tip.
Yeah, top tip, a bonus one for you there. I think the other thing with the top 10, the first 10 episodes as well, is that the algorithm, and not to get sort of too techie about it, but the algorithm favours new shows.
Yes.
For that, for the first 6 weeks. I think it's first 56 days. So let's call it round up and call it 2 months. But if you're going to go live with, between 2 and 4 episodes and a trailer, and so those first 10 episodes, you'll get them all in within that 56 day or that 2 month period. Yeah. And we've seen it again and again. For every download that a new show gets, or every download, engagement on it, or rating and review, or stream, or however you want to call it, I think that's worth 30 times out of an established show. And it is for the first 8 weeks.
It's at least double. It's
30 times. Don't argue. You heard of Phobos Boxing. But yeah, but build that momentum, because again, the algorithm is really going to favour you. Same with YouTube. If you can go live with a few episodes and you're posting shorts collectively. My wife's podcast this week, it's not even been a week that the show's been out, and it's done, they've done 1,500 views on YouTube so far.
Wow.
Mainly driven from the short form content, but equally, but it's still good content.
Eyeballs,
it's been pushed onto LinkedIn. It's been in the top charts.
Is this an episode of promotional opportunity for your wife's podcast?
It's not, but it should be. Please go and check out Real Talk Podcast by Hayley Burtt, Pippa Savoury, Lorraine Lewis, and Siobhan Mears. I thought I was going to forget their surnames, and I was like, that's going to be really bad, isn't it, if I forget?
Let's test you on this. What's the podcast about? 4 women talking about...
Check out Real Talk Podcast.
Available.
Real talk, real conversations, real life, real business.
Great. Available wherever you get your podcast.
Of course it is. Don't try and get me in this shit, Chisnall. What's wrong with you? Go on, what's your final point?
Right. Last 60 seconds. Post-launch momentum. What can you do to keep people coming back for more?
Consistency. There you go. One word answer. Consistency.
You're boring me now.
But it is true, like you said, like plan what you're going to post out. You know, on the day it goes live, a trailer. Day after, a clip. Day after, a carousel. Day after, maybe another clip. Day after, a blog. Like plan your content and put it out consistently. Try and find those platforms where you can maybe syndicate the content. So if there's like an industry newsletter, if you're in a niche of a niche, can you get them to share that content out? And make sure if you're a guest episode podcast that you get them to share out the content as well as best you can. Yeah. There is a way to do it. Alex's team are amazing with doing it. We've got videos in our training course, which you can click the link in the show notes and find out more about. It will be live by the time we put this podcast out. That's how confident I am saying it down the barrel of that camera. And you can find out more information about that. But yeah, get the guests to share it out. Be consistent. Job done.
Yeah, you're right. And the big one, like you say, you'll get a spike when, you know, that podcast, if you've promoted it, obviously, when that podcast goes live. If you get your guests or partners, collaborators, brand partners, whoever you collaborate with, you'll get a second spike or a third spike in downloads for that, and that creates post-launch momentum. Okay, get featured in publications off the back of it. You've had a successful launch. Interesting topics. Newspapers press are always looking for news stories. Make your podcast newsworthy. Make it a news story. There's loads of different things you can do. You build that community. Your community are going to create momentum for you. They're going to want to help you with that podcast and grow that podcast. So keep people coming back for more. 100%. So. Perfect podcast launch plan. On our course, we have got a perfect podcast launch plan mapped out.
Yeah, I think section 5 is all about launch plan, the launch fortnight, the launch day, the strategies, the tactics, the assets, all that stuff.
Fantastic. So look, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, do please tell one other person about this podcast. If you enjoyed it, this is our free content, okay? Not asking for any money in any way, shape or form.
Are we not?
No.
Oh, that's disappointing.
But they can go to our course if they'd like to learn to launch their own podcast and get everything they want in one place.
Absolutely.
But just go and tell somebody else about this podcast. We'll be eternally grateful. That's how we're going to grow this show, okay? Word of mouth. Thank you very much.